start welcoming everybody for another session of ATypI all over. So yeah, the next section will be with Nada. She will be presenting a lot of things very interesting about the research point of view in academia, how it is to approach for designers to, because as you know, like even when it comes not only for typography, but for design, we go for different approaches. We need to, yeah, especially now in this kind of weird time that we're living right now, we are always questioning the way we are doing things and who is that for. So I think it's really good to keep up with this discussion. So yeah, Bogota, 1 in the morning. Yeah, 1 a.m. Yeah, thanks very much for keeping it up. So yeah, Nada, I'll leave you to introduce yourself and what is about the presentation, and then we play the video. It actually is going to be 2 videos. One that should start presenting, that's the traditional one for the conference, and the second one is going to be the results from the workshop that she held 2 days ago. So yeah, can start with Nada. Welcome and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you for having me here in this beautiful platform. And we can play the video because the video has the introduction and yes.
All right, all good then. So
welcome to my talk. My name is Nada Abdallah. I'm an artist, designer, and educator. I teach design at the College of Fine Arts and Design at the University of Sharjah. I have been teaching design at the university level for almost 18 years now, between Beirut and Sharjah, taught in the higher colleges of technology, the Lebanese University and the Lebanese International University. I hold my bachelor degree in visual communication from the American University of Sharjah and my master's degree in visual communication from the Lebanese University. The title of my talk is Kufic Script from Calligraphy to Typography. Graphic design curricula in the Middle East follows the Western curricula and mainly an American one, overstepping the local norms and values. It's very important for us as educators is to define the role and our role as to set a benchmark to what is a vision and a mission of a design institution. So in order to deliver a message to our design students, it's very important that design educators prepare students to make positive change in their design communities. The very first question I do ask my students in the first session, how do they think design, how do they define design, and what is their understanding of graphic design, and why did they choose it as a major? Typical answers would rotate around, I want to learn new software, or I want to design logos and posters. Very, very few students state that they think about design as solving problems. True, delivering a final design solves a particular problem. However, the design process has more layers to it, and only a correct diagnosis would allow a doctor to prescribe a healing medicine. Intelligent design not only beautifies, but it also improves our experience in this world. Cultural sustainability is a very vital design layer. The visual outcome should perfectly fit the social and the cultural atmosphere. Cultural sustainability is a vital design layer, and visual outcome should perfectly fit the social and the cultural atmosphere. Big problem in the curriculum. I have been teaching in universities between Sharjah and Beirut for 18 years now. And before that, my experience as a design student at the American University of Sharjah led me to a particular conclusion that design curricula in the Middle East are tailored to prepare designers for a non-Arabic approach with very less or no emphasis on the semiotics and the cultural aspects of the Arab identity. Ironically, design in the Arab world follows Western aesthetics and forms. The Arab design students address cultural and local design projects using very Western images, typography, photography, illustration, etc. Therefore, I started assigning design projects where designing in Arabic is a must. It's not optional at all. This methodology was a struggle, very much of a struggle, especially at the beginning. Students complained about not having right fonts to do so, and they also lacked the interest and had no understanding of the process. The proper use or creation of Arabic typography could not be limited to some existing or defragmentation of the Latin or even distorting the Arabic cursive fonts, which I refer to as BOTOX typography. Traditional teaching methods, of course, ask students to Arabize the design projects from Latin fonts, but no, we need to think that we need students to actually design, for example, in Arabic, and then they can appropriate the Latin out of that. Here you see some signages from the streets and how the actually usage of a very distorted type. The importance and the must of using or creating Arabic fonts and typography that is appropriated from Arabic classical and beautiful Kufic calligraphy as an aesthetic expression was a sort of a solution to the problem. Another problem, of course, emerged, many problems, but I'm just stating some of them, having to deal with Western syllabi and criteria. So the syllabi and criteria was an obstacle. The solution was a term coined by Dr. Nadia Al-Hassani. She's the Dean of the College of Fine Arts and Design at the College of at the University of Sharjah. The solution was halal cheat. Halal cheat it means positively manipulating or adjusting something to suit the purpose of what is needed. There had to be some reliable platform focusing on the origins and the genuinely Arabic imagery. Bil Arabic is a festival that I found years ago, and it focuses on embracing the Arabic culture and design as a dynamic platform for open-ended collaboration, participation, and discussion. The objective of the festival was to revive the Arabic art and design, and it aims to integrate both the classical media with technology, while to initiate change and innovation and preservation in Arabic contents, concepts, and compositions. This is a very important quote that I was inspired by, and I'm always inspired by it. It's by His Highness, late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, the founder of the Emirate. He said, "He who does not know his past cannot make the best of his present and future, for it is from the past that we learn." The Arabic Design Festival, it has a strategy to work on intensive workshops, lectures, exhibitions, curricular and extracurricular. It was vital to explain to students the difference between calligraphy and typography. The first one being the art of writing, whereas the second as the art of using type. Therefore, I first introduced my students to the Kufic calligraphy. They thought that it's only limited to the square Kufic, whereas that wasn't at all how it all started. In the earlier stages, the Holy Script lacked the short vowels, the harakat, and the consonant markers, the ajam, leaving the script hard to read by anyone who had not already memorized it. Readability at that point depended on memory rather than legibility. These are some samples or parts of the very different Kufic scripts, from the very ancient one to the Western to the Eastern to the square, etc. And these are earlier ones. So typomotif was a solution. Typomotif is combination of typography and motif design. I conducted several workshops in Lebanon, Greece, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, UAE, and in particular on this particular hybrid style. In the workshops, students were or participants were generated new fonts and appropriated from the Square Kufic Script. It acted like a skeleton. They had to find that and work on it in order to design new contemporary approaches. The result was very bedazzling, and they started working on more trending styles such as the origami style, the brick, the kufia, the barbed wire, the mosaic, and etc. They used different media such as plexiglass, wood, wires, fabric, concrete. There is a big potential in the square Kufic. It has a traditional grid that enables them to generate new trendy display fonts. I'm gonna show you some of my student work just to make everything clear. Here, this student has worked on being inspired by the stitch to create the actual font or typo motifs. And here, the student was inspired by the origami style to create the script. Here, the inspiration came from the barbed wires. Here, it came from the broken glass. This is inspired by the Syrian mosaics. And this was inspired by the precious stone, the emerald. And here, more close-ups to see the details. And then the student has developed a wooden three-dimensional form of the font. Here, this is inspired by the chess, and or actually the checker box. And here, as you see, also the student has applied it using plexiglass. And this is inspired by the origami form. This is inspired by the barbed wires, the wheel print. These are also more approaches on stitch style and other more graphical linear styles. This is a font designed titled Muraqqam, and the student here designed the Arabic and then did the Latin one, some sort of a pixel style. And here created different posters in both Latin and Arabic, and then tried to push it more into creating more alternatives and trends. This is by another student. She worked on being inspired by the kufia to create her type. Here, the student was inspired by the mosaic and by the triangular motifs to create a very detailed ornamental form. So here we can see that the patterns do form the actual script. On the right, it says which is the Arabic for mother. And here it says wardu shok, which is the roses or the flowers and the thorns. So here, this is becoming more of a visual, so the typo motifs are creating more this kind of fusion between the visual and the image and the type. So here we have typography being an image. This is a project I gave to all the students where they had to create the Arabian world map with the actual type, and they had to keep the positioning of the countries similar to that on the map. So here it reads all the Arab countries, the names of the Arab countries, but in a form of the map. Same but not similar. These are all different ways to write the words in Arabic, بالعربي. So here, these different student work. Here is showing how beautiful and how the variety and the flexibility of the type itself. And we're only talking about the square Kufic as a grid or as a form that inspired students to generate infinite number of solutions. Here, we did a collaboration with the interior design students where they had to take the calligraphy design and to use the concrete to create these actual three-dimensional beautiful pieces. This is of the same design, but it's applied in different trends and styles. So as you see, we have the diamond shape, the point tip, and the actual three-dimensional sort of design. And here also we are still in with the same word بالعربي, but it's students here created even further and more developments on the actual word itself. And here they started working on some sort of like an Islamic pattern, trying to play around more with the actual word. And here more and more. So it's the students started to feel more engaged and that they can do it, and of course they did it. And here these are also more alternatives and different options and styles of the same word. And here this is a maze design from the actual script, so why not make it more playful? So they created different mazes. This is project in the College of Fine Arts and Design at the University of Sharjah. Since last year was the Year of Tolerance in the United Arab Emirates, I asked my students to take their cultures and motifs from their cultures and to be inspired by these motifs to create their typography. So every student was inspired by a particular image and then they created the type based on that. This is another project. It's choosing shops in Sharjah that required branding. They had a problem with the actual calligraphy or typography. So what the students have done, they were using typographical elements from the Emirati culture and developing an actual typo motif to suit an actual, for example, suggested solution to solve the problem. So here it says Al-Qahwa Al-Shabiya, which is a coffee shop. And here it says Al-Dar Lit-Turath, heritage. It's a heritage shop. So here also the student was inspired by the prehistoric motifs from the Sharjah Museum, historical museum. And then here she thought she wants to work with a triangle as a grid, triangular grid, and then created this final design. So here also applied it on stationery. This is also by another student, and it's for tailoring and embroidery shop. This is another project. Students were required to be inspired by their own countries to design new brands. So the student is from Egypt. She picked the juice shops in Egypt, and she titled her brand as Izaza. And of course, what she did is she tried to experiment with a different geometric form to create her actual name style, and then applied that into banner design. Here in packaging. So here, as you see, the students were required to pick also a package that had a problem and to design typographical solutions using the Kufic grid as a structure. So on the top, what you see that these were her first attempts, and they had problems, but then she corrected that working on a specific grid. And what she did was she was inspired by the olive oil and the olive actually tree and the embroidery, and this is the original logo that she developed this new one out of that, and that's her packaging. Here you see some close-ups of the work. So with all these patterns, she's trying to create also with the same grid. She's trying to come up with different approaches to suit her design. And this is the before and the after. And this project won the first place in the Arab Star Pack student packaging competition this year. And this is another also award-winning project. The student also won in the Arab Star packaging competition. And here, as you see, the student was inspired by the actual wheat to design a brand for wheat, and it's titled Baker. So here, what the student did was she started to experiment and explore and to develop, and this was her final design package. And the one on the left was the actual original one. What I want to mention here, and this is what I explained this to my design student, is that it's very important for them to understand that the learning pyramid designed by Benjamin Bloom is very important for them to understand, because to create is on the top of the pyramid. For them to create, they need to be able to evaluate. To be able to evaluate, they need to be able to analyze. To be able to analyze, they need to apply, or to be able to apply. And they need to apply, they need to understand. For them to understand, they need to remember. So design is not a one layer. You cannot go on top of the pyramid and to create if you don't understand all the layers in the learning pyramid. So after all, finally, I would love to mention that designers, they are the cultural ambassadors. They are the sustainers of their heritage through their professional practice. Thank you.
Thanks again. Yes, it looks it was really interesting. I would like to start with that. So if you have if you have any questions, please write down in the chat. Meanwhile, I would like to start is just bring it up since we're talking about the workshop itself. So I'm wondering if you did run workshops in the online environment before, or because by the pictures I could see that most of them, or at least all of them, they are face to face. Was that the first time that I have to deliver it online?
Actually, since we had the pandemic, we've been doing, because I'm a professor at the university, so we've been doing, for now, a year and a half of online teaching every day. Yeah, I'm very familiar with teaching online. So what I did is I worked with my participants on actually using Excel live sheet on the Google Drive. So they were working live and I was seeing everything on one screen. So instead of using the grid paper, so we were using Microsoft Excel with the actual grids, and they were working. Everybody was seeing everybody's work, and it went fantastic. And yes, so it went well. Yeah, actually, we need to use technology, I mean, to the max. So we can't say that it can't be possible. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Even how to overcome, let's say, the restrictions, and then can using Excel is a really brilliant idea. Because my question would be more related to actually not about doing online, but by the effect that during ATypI, probably you have like a more heterogeneous audience than usually when you go to one specific place. So I would like to know if did you perceive any difference between by having participants going all over the place at the same time, or if it is any different when you go in one specific site?
Yes, very true. This is the first time I have participants from, I mean, they are non-Arabic speakers. So we had from India, from Mexico, from Iran, from the United Arab Emirates, from Egypt, and other countries also. So the beautiful thing about this beautiful conference is that it brought people from very different backgrounds and even in very different time zones together. This is the first time we're doing multilingual Kufic. So it's like, how can you be inspired, let's say, by this actual structure and grid to create different words of positive words actually, because the requirement was you need to think positive, you need to think of a word that gives hope in this time of the in this time that we're living in. So yeah, I think it's very interesting to bring all these people together to create. Yeah, so typography unites us all.
Yeah. So yeah, it was really interesting that also Stephen was just doing this question on the chat that I say if you do teach workshop for non-Arabic readers. Yeah, but he just answered that, right?
Yes.
Because yeah, he was wondering about the methods to be the good way to design is to have an understanding on this topic. So yeah, but I think you already touched on that. Yeah, thanks Stephen for the question. Let's see if we have. I think we have a few more in here. Yes, Nace is just making a comment about how to encourage people with positive words, because that's exactly what we need right now. Yeah, really interesting.
To always think positive, because that's the only medicine I think that we have, to always think positive with a very big, wide smile, and that's it.
Yeah, and I have another question for you. That is this thing about, because as you said at the beginning about usually they have this non-Arabic approach, and then first of all you're trying to get them to not to have this mindset, and then because of course when you're trying to compare different methodologies, different techniques, sometimes they do not apply for other cultures. So that's I think that, as you said, that probably is you pointed out that's the biggest issue that we have. I think Ishan did the same thing, mentioned the same thing about India, that on the chat that he was saying it was exactly the same thing. So I would like to just point it out, it's actually not a question, but I would like to highlight that I could see through your presentation, even the use of motion graphics, something that is like really some techniques that we usually, when you think, even for typeface design, sometimes people just still stay on black and white on paper, and they don't get use of technology. So I think I can see that it's part of your mindset when you mentioned about the Excel file that you're doing, like kind of overcoming using the software for different purposes. Because I would like to highlight how it was even by when you show us the grid by putting like in a pixel grid, how you can solve letter forms. Because in that case, it doesn't matter which language, which script, which system it is. It's pretty much about you're applying design principles, right? So I think so I think that was a really nice thing to say, that even the motion graphics and sometimes even more analog techniques like wood blocks will be the same thing, because again, it doesn't matter what you're having in there, but you face the same issues, right?
It's like a unit. So it's like these Lego pieces brought together. So how you can work on it like that. Yes, true. It's very true what you said. So, yes.
Yeah, we have another one here as a non-Arabic speaker, and so it's from Willie. He's always interested in how to use Kufic scripts. It looks completely graphical, but do you also feel it's easily readable?
We need to think of readability, legibility, unless you want to make it as abstract art and you just want to have it as, I mean, you don't, the aim is not legibility, that's another story. But if we're doing visual communication and we need to use it as design, it needs to communicate. It's easy. You can find something in between this and that, and to see if it works for you. But after all, we need to think how we can actually make it readable, and this is challenging.
Yeah. Do you get to print that? How is the process of checking out about legibility? So like reading for distance and so on. So how do you usually approach that?
By testing it. First of all, we start with the simple form. So, and then we can try to develop it to see if, for example, you develop the style, you integrate it, let's say an element or a motif. Is it legible? If we are to share maybe one of the, for example, the PDF files, I don't know if we have time.
I can bring it up for you while you continue talking. So just a second.
Can I control moving in the pages?
I think so. So just add to the playlist.
Because I want to take you to, yes, I think, yeah.
Is that the one?
Yes, yes. No, that's the presentation.
Ah, that's the presentation. So I'll bring it up the other one.
So maybe right now, if I just show you briefly to answer, because we need to show an example to answer this.
It is a portfolio one.
It's the portfolio.
Type of motif, portfolio. Okay. So just add that one to the playlist. So just a second.
So let's see together. So I'm just gonna briefly, so we can move on with. So that's the handout, the main motifs. So these were the main lists from the prehistoric motifs. So here you see the different structures. So here showed, of course, different examples.
I think it's still loading. Can you see the page loading, or
it's
not,
not
if it's only for me? Yeah, I think it's still loading. Yeah. Oh. Meanwhile, there's a question here from Nace that if you did ever make test of readability or legibility on certain devices, for example, eye tracking. That's a really nice question.
No, we didn't try that. But like, for example, here where we started, for example, and then the participants started to experiment. Is it showing or?
Yeah, right now it is, yeah.
Okay, so here, as you see, they started with their actual handwriting and then moved it into abstracting it or trying to make it on a grid, trying to build the actual words. So here it was inspired by the Musharrabiyya. Here, for example, this is by another participant. And what you see here, also just trying to move on with the different design. Let's say to another. So here, maybe when it becomes of a pattern here, for example, it's illegible. But that becomes more of a pattern rather than, so the type is forming a pattern. So here it's hard to read unless you see it as a one unit, or you maybe highlight it with a different color, or I don't know, then it would be clearer. So here this is another word. So they were trying to see how clear it could be, or legible versus illegible. And so, okay, here, this is a very interesting approach. So here we have the word mawadda, which is for love. So here, as you see, when it's in the checker box style, like chess, it's illegible. But then what she did smartly is she combined in her poster, what she did is she combined, in the center, she actually worked on the word being clear, but then around it, she used that as an ornament. And in Islamic art, it's very popular where you have calligraphy and then you have an ornament or a pattern around it. So maybe it's the combination, or you need to know what you want out of the design piece. Do you want to use it? Do you want people to read it, or you want it just to be as a visual? And sometimes they do include what the sentence is at the bottom. Let's say if it's very abstract, they would include that. For me, I try to encourage my students to work on having it really clear without having to add a description and clarifying it, working on it underneath. So here, as you see, these are different applications. Yeah, so that's it. So summarize. So this is how it started, by writing, then applying it onto the grid as you see, and then finally created of course they finalized the design on Illustrator, But I mean, they sketched on Excel itself.
Nice.
Yes.
I like the process of going, not stopping at the letter forms, but actually putting into context, because I think they can realize by themselves if it's working or not. So like the one you mentioned for the packaging, they won a design award. I think that one proves the point that it doesn't matter which technique you're using, but if you put it into context and if it works, it's fine. So I think that it's gonna push them forward to do things in less traditional ways, because otherwise they'll be doing all the same over and over.
Yeah.
So yeah, really nice process.
When I mentioned about the thing about the curriculum, we only have one typography course in, let's say, the 4-year program. So and that one semester, or sorry, one course, which is it's you can't teach all these principles and elements to the students. That's where I had to try to do extracurricular activities, intensive workshops aside, and if, let's say, they're doing packaging, they have to integrate. If they're doing an editorial, they have to integrate. But still, I think we should always find a way to make it work. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I don't see any more questions on the chat, but anyway, we need to wrap it up soon. So yeah, thanks very much, Nada, for the presentation. I think it was really nice to see what you have done so far, and yeah, hope to continue following what you have what you'll be doing in the future. So yes, please follow her on social media, trying to catch up to see if what she will be doing next. And also, we will encourage people to go to the lounge that we have, the hangout room, because there we can continue the conversation as well, or either on this topic or about something else. Because I know sometimes you're willing to talk rather than just writing. So there's an option that we have to go in continue this conversation. So yes, I'd like to thank very much for everybody that attended this session. And yeah, please have a look at the agenda. There we are still adding a few more talks. So probably either for today or for tomorrow, will be new talks at any moment. And yes, thank you very much for joining us. Hope to see you in a future session. All right. Thank you, Nada.
Yeah.